Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Take Care Time, the tales and exhales of caregivers. I'm your host, Beverly Nance, and it's an honor to have you join me for the third and final episode of our series, Semper Fi. This series has been a heartfelt exploration of the lives of caregivers and their loved ones in the military, navigating the challenging terrain of love, sacrifice, and identity. In today's episode, we're diving deep into the pivotal moment for Winston and Brooke, as they each face crossroads in their lives. For Winston, it's about grappling with the loss of his limb and his military identity that has defined him for so long. For Brooke, it's about confronting her own feelings of loneliness and finding solace in an unexpected connection. This episode is about choices, the ones we make in the darkest of times, and how they shape who we are and who we become. So grab a cup of tea, settle in, and let's journey together as we unravel the final chapter of Semper Fi. Brooke sits in a quiet coffee shop near the hospital where Winston is undergoing another grueling day of physical therapy. She stirs her cup absent-mindedly, her thoughts clouded by guilt and confusion. For months, Winston's injuries had been a shared burden, but lately she felt herself drifting, her heart searching for comfort she could no longer find in their shared pain. Enter Edward, a man she met at the beach following one of her counseling sessions. Brooke had been sitting at the beach minding her own business when she met Edward. They struck up a conversation, at first about his photography and then about life. There was an ease with him, a freedom in talking to someone who didn't know the weight she carried. Edward grew up in San Diego, a military town where hanging out at the beach was a common way of life. As a matter of fact, the rhythm of waves became the soundtrack to his life. From an early age, he was fascinated by the interplay of light and water, which led him to photography. He pursued a career in photojournalism, capturing stories of resilience and humanity from around the world. However, years of traveling to war zones and disaster-stricken areas left Edward with his own emotional scars. Seeking peace, he returned to his hometown of San Diego and began focusing on the art of landscapes and quiet moments, using photography as a form of healing. When Edward met Brooke at the beach, he immediately recognized the weight she was carrying, having seen it on himself before. His empathetic nature and quiet demeanor created a safe space for Brooke to open up, starting a connection that felt both unexpected and undeniable. Her phone buzzes on the table, interrupting her daydreams. It's a message from Winston. "Tough session today, but I'm hanging in there. Can't wait to see you later. Love you." She swallows hard, the words, "love you," weighing heavier than ever before. Winston is at the VA hospital, lying on the therapy mat, beads of sweat dripping down his face as he struggles with a new prosthetic leg. His therapist, Sergeant Hayes, a fellow Marine who lost his own limb years ago, pushes him relentlessly. "Come on, Marine! I've seen grannies moving faster than you. Get up!" Winston grits his teeth and pushes himself up, but he's not just battling the physical challenge. His mind is tormented by the looming uncertainty of his future. If he can't return to active duty, who is he? Being a Marine wasn't just a job, it was his identity, his purpose. After the session, Sergeant Hayes approaches Winston, who is sitting on the therapy bench, shoulders slumped. "You look like hell," Hayes says, sitting down next to him. "Good. That means you've worked hard." Winston chuckles dryly. "Yeah, well, hard work doesn't change the fact that I'll never be a Marine again." Hayes nods, his tone turning serious. I know what you're feeling. When I lost my leg, I thought the same thing. Hell, I drank myself stupid for a year, trying to forget the Corps has no use for a broken man. Winston looks over at Hayes. So, how'd you stop? How'd you move on? I didn't stop, Hayes said firmly. I shifted. I found a new mission. For me, it's helping guys like you. We don't stop being Marines just because we're not on active duty. Overcome. That's what you've got to do now. Find your new mission. Winston stares at the floor. And what if I can't? Hayes claps him on his back. You can. You're already stronger than you think. You showed up today. You showed up yesterday. You showed up last week, didn't you? That's the first step. It's one step at a time. That's how you climb a mountain, Winston, one step at a time. The words linger with Winston as Hayes gets up and leaves. For the first time in weeks, a spark of determination flickers in Winston's eyes. Later that day, Winston pulls his phone from his pocket and dials Brooke's number. The exhaustion in his voice is apparent as he waits for her to pick up. Hey, he says when she answers, I'm ready to be picked up. Brooke, still sitting in the coffee shop, glances at the clock. I'm on my way, she replies, masking the turmoil in her voice. She grabs her keys and heads to the car, mentally bracing herself for the weight of their shared evening ahead. When she arrives, Winston is waiting outside the hospital, leaning against the railing. His weariness is etched deeply in his face, but he manages a faint smile when he sees her. She steps out to help him, but he waves her off. I've got it, he insists, limping slightly as he climbs into the passenger seat. The ride home is quiet, the silence filled with unspoken words. Brooke grips the steering wheel tightly, her mind already wandering into the evening ahead. That evening, after dinner, Brooke approaches Winston as he sits in the living room, flipping idly through channels on the TV. I'm going out tonight, she says, trying to sound casual. To the movies with my friends. Winston glances at her briefly and nods. Okay, have fun. I'll put the boys to bed at 8. She feels a pang of guilt, but quickly brushes it aside. Grabbing her purse, she heads out the door and drives to the park where she and Edward agreed to meet. The tension in her chest begins to ease as she spots him standing near the bench where they often talk. Edward greets her with a warm smile. Brooke, you made it. Yeah, she said softly, taking a seat beside him. I needed to get out of the house. Thank you. For the next hour, they talk about everything and nothing, his presence a balm to her weary soul. But even as she laughs at something he says, the shadow of guilt looms large in her mind. She knows she's treading dangerous waters, but for now, she lets herself linger in the fleeting comfort of Edward's company. Their conversation grows quieter as the evening deepens, and Edward gently places his hand on hers. Brooke doesn't pull away. Instead, she looks at him, her emotions a whirlwind of longing and guilt. The moment stretches, and before she knows it, his hand brushes her cheek. The touch is brief, but electric, and it makes her chest tighten with a confusing mix of feelings. She finally stands and whispers, I should go. Edward nods, his expression unreadable. Be safe, Brooke. When Brooke arrives home, the house is quiet, save for the hum of the television in the living room. Winston is still awake. His eyes flicker to meet hers as she steps inside. You're back late, he says, his voice neutral but laced with curiosity. Yeah, Brooke replies, setting her purse down on the counter. The movie ran longer than I thought. Winston leans forward slightly. Did you have a good time? She hesitates, the weight of her guilt pressing down. Yeah, it was nice to catch up with the girls. Winston studies her for a moment, his gaze searching. You seem different. Is everything okay? Brooke forces a smile, though it feels brittle. Everything's fine, Winston. I'm just tired. All right, he says softly, leaning back. Get some rest. As Brooke heads upstairs, her heart aches with the weight of what she's hiding. The comfort she sought with Edward now feels like a betrayal. She's unsure she can reconcile. The next day, Brooke finds herself in the kitchen preparing for a family gathering. The smell of fresh coffee and baked goods fills the air as she tries to push her thoughts of Edward aside. However, her older sister, Laurel, ever perceptive, notices something is off. While their husbands laugh over a sports debate in the living room, Laurel corners Brooke. "You've been a bit out of it today," Laurel remarks, raising her eyebrow. "What's going on with you?" Brooke hesitates, gripping the edge of the counter for support. I've been seeing someone, Laurel," she whispers, her voice trembling. "His name is Edward." Laurel's face registers shock, but she quickly composes herself, placing a reassuring hand on Brooke's arm. "Edward? Are you serious? What about Winston?" Brooke sighs, her shoulders slumping as she pours out her heart. "It's not like that. Well, it is like that, but it isn't like that. He makes me feel alive, Laurel. Like I'm someone other than just a caregiver. I love Winston, but sometimes I feel like I'm suffocating. Like I'm lost myself completely." Laurel looks at her sister with a mixture of compassion and concern. "Brooke, this is serious. You need to figure out what you want. Winston deserves honesty, and you deserve clarity. You can't keep living like this. It's not fair to anyone." Brooke nods, wiping away a stray tear. "I know. I'm just scared of what's next." Their conversation is interrupted by laughter from the living room, but the weight of Brooke's confession lingers between them. For the first time in weeks, she feels a glimmer of relief in sharing her truth, even if it brings more questions than answers. Later that night, Brooke finds herself unable to sleep. The silence of the house feels oppressive, amplifying the cacophony of thoughts in her mind. She slips out of bed and tiptoes into the kitchen, the faint glow of the refrigerator light her only companion. Her gaze falls on the family photo pinned to the fridge, a snapshot of better days, when she and Winston laughed freely, unburdened by their current struggles. As she traces the edge of the photo, a wave of guilt washes over her. She wonders if she has the strength to keep fighting for their relationship, or if her heart has already drifted too far. Edward's words echo in her mind, but so does the memory of Winston's resilience in therapy, his determination to adapt despite his pain. The weight of her dual lives feeling unbearable, Brooke sinks into the chair at the kitchen table, her head in her hands, slightly pleading for clarity she knows won't come easily. The next morning, Winston notices Brooke's subdued demeanor as they share a quiet breakfast. After a few moments of silence, he places his coffee cup down and looks at her intently. "Brooke," he begins, his voice steady but concerned, "I know something's been bothering you. I don't want to push, but if you ever need to talk, I'm here." His words catch her off guard. For a moment, she considers brushing him off again, but the vulnerability in his eyes stops her. Brooke realizes that Winston is offering her an opening, a chance to be honest, to begin untangling the web of secrets threatening to consume them. I'm trying to figure things out," she says finally, her voice trembling. "There's so much I need to sort through." Winston nods, not pressing further. "Take your time. Just know you don't have to face it alone." Brooke's chest tightens with conflicting emotions. She knows the road ahead will be difficult, but Winston's quiet support gives her a flicker of hope that perhaps they can find their way back to each other, or at least a way forward. Later that afternoon, as Winston sits in the living room, trying to focus on the news, the familiar hum of the mail truck draws his attention. He sets his coffee cup down and walks to the mailbox, his prosthetic leg clinking slightly with each step. The stack of mail feels heavier than usual, and among the usual bills and flyers is an official envelope bearing the Marine Corps insignia. Winston's stomach knots as he tears it open, his hands trembling. He already knows what it is before he reads the words. medical discharge, effective immediately. The carefully typed letter details the terms of his release, thanks him for his service, and highlights the medical reasons behind their decision. To Winston, it reads more like a dismissal than gratitude. He sinks onto the porch steps, the envelope slipping from his grasp. The warm breeze passes his face, but he hardly notices. For a moment, he feels like a ghost of himself, a man who no longer belongs. Being a Marine wasn't just a job. It was his purpose, his identity. And now, with a single letter, it's all gone. Inside, Brooke calls out, "Winston, everything okay out there?" Her voice jolts him back, but instead of responding, he folds the letter and tucks it into his pocket. He needs time to process, to feel the full weight of the loss. Returning inside, he grabs his journal from the side table and flips to a fresh page and writes, "I was born to serve, but what am I now?" That evening, Winston sits alone in the garage, the letter unfolded beside him. He replays Sergeant Hayes' words in his mind. "We don't stop being Marines just because we're not on active duty." But the truth feels harder to believe now. He knows he needs a new mission, but the path forward seems impossibly steep. Brooke finds him there, her shadow falling across the door. "Hey," she says softly, her eyes flickering to the letter. "You got it, didn't you?" Winston nods, but doesn't meet her gaze. "Yep, it's official now. I'm out." Brooke steps closer, her voice trembling. "I know this is hard, but you're still Winston. You're still the man who fought for his country, who fights every day to keep going." He finally looks at her, his eyes red-rimmed but steady. I don't know who I am without it, Brooke." "You'll find out," she says with her hand resting lightly on his shoulder. "And I'll be there, no matter what." For a moment, they sit in the quiet together, the weight of the discharge letter a reminder of the battles they still have to face, both together and apart. In the months that followed Winston's medical discharge, he threw himself into a grueling routine of physical therapy and mental growth. Inspired by Sergeant Hayes and fueled by his own struggles, Winston began to explore ways he could help other Marines who found themselves in similar situations. He started attending veterans networking events and speaking to groups about his journey. Gradually, an ideal took root. One afternoon, as he sat at the kitchen table with his laptop, he looked up at Brooke. "I've been thinking about starting my own thing," he said, his voice steady but tinged with excitement. "Helping Marines like me, guys who are trying to figure out what's next." Brooke put down the stack of papers that she was grading and smiled. "That sounds incredible, Winston. You'd be amazing at it." With Brooke's encouragement, Winston began laying the groundwork to become an independent contractor. His goal was to provide personalized support to injured Marines, helping them navigate the complex world of medical discharge, rehabilitation, and finding a new purpose. It wasn't easy, but for the first time in a long time, Winston felt a renewed sense of direction. He wasn't just surviving, he was building something meaningful. Meanwhile, Brooke found herself reevaluating her own life. The night she ended things with Edward had been one of the hardest moments she faced. She met him at their usual spot in the park, her heart heavy with resolute. "Edward," she began, her voice shaking, "I can't do this anymore. I've been using our time together as an escape, but it's not fair for you or my family." Edward nodded, his expression pained but understanding. "I get it, Brooke. I just want you to be happy." I need to try to fix what's broken at home," she said. "Thank you for being there for me. But this has to end." As Brooke walked away from Edward for the last time, she felt a mix of sadness and relief. The clarity she had sought for months was finally within reach. Brooke's next step was rediscovering a part of herself that had long been buried, her love of teaching. Encouraged by Winston's determination and her sister's support, she began researching opportunities to return to the classroom. It started with substitute teaching, and as the weeks passed, her confidence grew. She soon accepted a full-time position at a local elementary school. Standing in front of the classroom again, Brooke felt a sense of purpose she hadn't experienced in years. At home, the changes in both Winston and Brooke created a new dynamic in their marriage. They began sharing their struggles and dreams more openly, rebuilding trust one conversation at a time. Brooke supported Winston as he launched his business, and he celebrated her decision to follow her passion for teaching. Together, they found a balance that had been missing for so long. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Winston turned to Brooke. "I don't know where this path is going to take us," he said, "but I'm glad we're walking it together." Brooke smiled, her hand resting in his. "Me too. We're stronger than we've given ourselves credit for." The road ahead wasn't without challenge, but for the first time in a long time, Winston and Brooke felt hopeful. Their bold choices had not only reshaped their individual lives, but also brought them closer together, reminding them of the power of resilience and the strength of their love. Looking for resources for people like Brooke and Winston? We recommend the Veterans Crisis Line at veteranscrisisline.net. The Wounded Warrior Project, woundedwarriorproject.org. Caregiver Action Network, caregiveraction.org. Operation Homefront at operationhomefront.org. We also recommend our very own Caregiving Life support group on Facebook. You can find us under Caregiving Life at Facebook. Remember, reaching out for help is a sign of strength. You're not alone in your journey. Being a caregiver can be exhausting, but taking time for yourself isn't just a luxury, it's a necessity. That's where Take Care Time Respite Box comes in. Carefully curated to provide comfort, relaxation, and joy, each box is designed to help you recharge and find moments of peace in your busy life. Inside the box, you'll find, hand-selected, self-care items such as balming teas, soothing candles, inspirational books, activities to help you unwind and refocus from puzzles to journals. A reminder that you deserve to feel cared for too. Because when you take care of yourself, you're better equipped to take care of those you love. Visit takecaretime.com to learn more and order your respite box today. You deserve it. Do you have a caregiver story that you would like to have told? Email us at podcast@takecaretime.com. We would love to hear from you. Please note that this episode features reenactments and dramatized details. While in most cases the exact verbatim dialogue may not be known, all dramatizations are grounded in thorough research and crafted to honor the stories shared. To respect the privacy and confidentiality of individuals involved, names and some identifying details have been changed. Until next week, take care.